Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kari. I thought today that I would do a little recent reads wrap up to tell you everything that I've read so far in 2022. Picture this, January 1st. We're in the gloomy, freezing Parisian weather. You have to walk outside everywhere in the freezing cold to get anywhere. The sun is setting at 4:30. Seasonal depression is in full swing. What do you want to read? Yes, exactly. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. You know, sometimes you just have to lean in to what life is giving you and just embrace it. Obviously, I'm making light of this, but this book is a very serious book. Huge content warnings. Make sure you check those out before you read it. I'm making jokes, but seriously, check out the content warnings first. This was the first thing that I read this year, and holy cow, I understand why this is all over BookTube. What a powerful book. If somehow you've never heard what this is about, it follows 4 friends in New York City, but mostly one of the 4 friends whose name is Jude. When I first heard about this book, I constantly heard it follows 4 male friends in New York City. Well, yeah, technically it follows the 4 friends for maybe like 25% of the book, but mostly it follows Jude, one of these 4 friends. The things that are happening to Jude and the choices that he's making in the current timeline, plus learning about everything that he has experienced in his life previously. It's horrific, the things that have happened to him that he's experiencing today. Hanya Yanagihara really said, you're gonna feel something. And by God, I did. So with that in mind, you may think, well, how can a book about such traumatic events be considered good? Well, good question. What makes this book so powerful, I think, is Hanya Yanagihara's writing. It's extremely poetic, it's beautiful. I don't think that this book would be as famous as it is if it didn't make people feel the way that it makes them feel. And the power that she has with words to make people feel such extreme emotions really goes to show you the power of her writing. That this construction of words that she's putting together can make people feel so incredibly strongly about the book. So I think that that says a lot. Also, it's incredible the way that she makes such horrific content, such horrific things that have happened to Jude, to use such beautiful language to depict it. It's really almost contradictory and goes to show just how powerful this book is and just how important this text is. A lot of people say that this is trauma porn, which I totally understand. However, I really appreciated this book. I think it's a masterpiece, the way that she writes about such horrific and horrible things happening to Jude and makes you feel so many emotions. I think that that is really powerful and shows what a great writer she is. Actually, when I was in the middle of reading this, I was appreciating her writing so much that I pre-ordered To Paradise, her new book that came out at the beginning of this year. I just knew that I needed more of her writing in my life. Also, I think it's really incredible the way that she leaves the reader little breadcrumbs throughout the book and that they come together full circle at the end of the book. It's really beautifully done, and I really like the way that she jumps forward and backwards in time at just the right moments in the story. Also, she always gives you just enough information to keep you intrigued about what happened in the past and just gives you little clues about what happened, and then you jump back to the present. It's really like a puzzle that you're putting together to try and figure out what has happened to Jude and what is he experiencing and why has all this happened to him. Also, a little side note, if you take public transportation, I would not recommend reading this in public transportation because I was almost finished with the book. I had like a half a chapter left and I knew the end is coming, and I was on the metro and I was like, I cannot read this here. I'm gonna have to save it. I need to be alone to experience this. And so I waited until I got home, and I'm so glad that I did because that was painful. It's just so powerful, and it's all those breadcrumbs coming back together. If you can appreciate a sad book, this is the sad book. I would highly recommend, but make sure you check the content warnings first. After I gave my review for this book on Goodreads, I was scrolling through looking at people that I follow on Goodreads, what their reviews were, and Kat from Paperback Dreams, she summed it up perfectly, as always. She said, did I finish this book or did this book finish me? Yes. That's the best way to sum up this book. I gave this 5 stars because I absolutely loved it. It was so powerful. The next book that I read this year was something that I picked up at Shakespeare & Company, and that is On Animals by Susan Orlean. It's pretty rare these days that I go to a bookstore and just browse and choose something that I've never even heard of before, but that's what I did for this book from Shakespeare & Company, and I'm a huge animal lover, so I thought that this would be a good book for me. Basically, it's just a collection of essays about animals, so each essay is about a different type of animal. So like there's an essay about a show dog, there's an essay about homing pigeons, there's an essay about tigers, where the tigers get loose in the city. It's really just random essays about animals. Now, while I did find some of the essays interesting, so for example, the one about homing pigeons, I had no idea how homing pigeons work, and so that was interesting to learn about. However, that wasn't really what I was looking for. I don't really know what I was looking for, but that wasn't it. I didn't really like this one. I thought maybe she would have some arguments for like being vegetarian, for example, but that wasn't in here at all. But yeah, so overall, I didn't really like this one. I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I read has to do with animals too, but very different vibes. And that was Bunny by Mona Awad. So while On Animals was about the nature of different animals, this a little bit different. So if you've never heard about Bunny before, basically it's about this group of girls. They're a very strong clique of girls, like mean girls almost, and they all call each other Bunny. And our protagonist, who we're following her points of view, she hates these girls. But then one day she's invited to hang out with them and she goes. The protagonist's best friend is like, "Are you sure you really want to hang out with them? Don't you hate them?" But the protagonist goes anyway. And basically, shit gets weird real fast. I wasn't sure if I would like this or not, but I freaking loved it. It's so good. If you like weird books, read it now. What are you waiting for? I just think it was so well done, and it really tests the reader to put the pieces together. And at the end, Mona Awad just trusts you to take the story where it's supposed to go almost. Like, it's almost up to interpretation, kind of. I've heard a lot of different ways that people think that it ends, and I think that's cool that it's interpreted differently. You could just kind of take it how you want to take it. I don't know. It's incredible, and I already can't wait to read it again. I gave this 5 stars. The next book I read, I actually don't have a physical copy of. I read it on my iPad, and that's The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. So this is a children's book with some really unique illustrations, but basically it's just little life lessons for, well, I was going to say children, but it's not just for children. It made me cry. Some of the observations that are in there are really powerful, and it's really good. I would recommend it for anyone because there's some really powerful human observations in it, and I just love it. However, the illustrations are cute. I like the illustrations, but it's not necessarily the style that I really like. I wish it would have been a different illustration style, but they're still beautiful. It's just not my favorite type of illustration, but the writing itself, beautiful. I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read was a thriller, and that's The Au Pair by Emma Rous. So this one's about an au pair, obviously, who gets hired to go work with a family in England to go take care of this one child. And then the mother ends up having twins while she's working as an au pair. Then the day after the twins are born, the mom commits suicide. Now that's not a spoiler, it's in the blurb. It's literally the beginning of the book. And so the timeline flashes back and forth between the past and the present. And so it's from the point of view of one of the twins who is trying to ask people and trying to get in touch with the previous au pair to find out what happened to their mom. She just had kids literally the day before. Why would she do such a thing? And so it follows her trying to get in touch with the au pair in current time to find out what happened. What does she know? Can she help piece the story together for her? I was really looking forward to reading this. I like that when I had a theory that a few pages later it was basically ruled out, because I don't like to figure out my thrillers. I know some people, they want to be able to figure it out, but me, I don't like to figure it out. I think it's a bad thriller if I can figure it out. So I like that my theories were one by one, you know, they were ruled out. However, the twist was really bad. Just like unbelievable, like literally unbelievable. I did give it 3 stars because I was enjoying it up until the twist, but the twist really ruined it for me and ruined my enjoyment of it. So after not having much success with the au pair, I tried another thriller, and that was The Wife Between Us by Greer, Hendricks, and Sarah Pekkanen. So this is a dual perspective about 2 women. One woman is about to get married to this man, and then the other perspective is another woman who is the ex-wife of that man. The ex-wife She's jealous of the new wife and tries to get her ex-husband back, and then the new wife thinks that the ex-wife is crazy, and the husband's telling her, oh no, she's crazy, she's my ex-wife, you can't believe anything that she says. But we understand that something isn't quite right with this guy, and so the ex-wife is jealous of the new wife, but also something happened with the ex-husband, and we're trying to piece it all together. Now, again, unfortunately, I didn't have very much luck with this thriller either, because it wasn't thrilling. A thriller without thrill. I really wasn't attached to this at all. I really didn't care about the characters. I didn't really care about the motivations for the characters. It didn't make sense why one of the characters did what she was doing, so I gave it 2.5 stars. The next book I read was Matrix by Groff. Let's appreciate this cover. As I said in my book haul, this is how you do a cover. This is an incredible book cover. She's gorgeous. Now, if we forget about that and talk about the plot, all cover, no plot. So this is actually a fictionalized retelling of a real person in France's history. Her name is Marie de France. She was basically kicked out of the court by Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine and sent to an abbey to give a new life to this abbey and to take care of it. Now you can appreciate the story if you know a little bit about the history of Marie de France, but still, it's not going to save it because I still didn't really like this story. I think it was too focused on the mundane activities of taking care of the abbey, like the farming, for example. Now, I like a story with no plot, but this was really no plot and no motivations at all. Also, the dialogue is written really weirdly. Like, I couldn't even tell that it was dialogue for a good portion of the story, and then I realized that it was dialogue. I think that's a strange choice that Groff made. At the end, I was so desperate to just finish it. I got the audiobook off of Libby and had to listen to it at the same time as reading it just to force myself to finish it. However, the audiobook performance was really well done, so if you're interested in this story, I would suggest the audiobook. Now, I didn't listen to the whole thing, just the ending, but I imagine the whole thing would be pretty good, so I would recommend, if the story is interesting, get the audiobook. I gave this 1 star, unfortunately. So the next book I read, I actually talked about in my book haul, which if you haven't seen it yet, I'll link it down below, but that is You Deserve Nothing by Alexander Maksik. So this is set at an international high school in Paris, and so all the students, they speak English. They're from around the world, but they all speak English, and the school is in English. It follows this teacher that everybody loves. His name's William Silver. Most high schools, they have at least one teacher that a lot of the students connect with and really appreciate and really look up to, and they love going to their class, and they do things to be better just to make this teacher proud. So William Silver is that teacher. Students love him. So this book actually follows 3 perspectives. One is William Silver, the teacher. One is a male student in Mr. Silver's class, and the final perspective is a female student who isn't in Mr. Silver's class but goes to the school. In this book, we spend a lot of time in Mr. Silver's classroom, and we see what an incredible teacher he is. He really cares about the students' development, and he wants them to be good people and to grow up and be good citizens and to care about people and to have critical thinking skills and to really go out and make a difference in the world. He knows that there's more to life than the content that they're supposed to be learning at school. He knows that you're supposed to be learning, critical thinking and how to think for yourself and to have respect for others, and it's really admirable the way that he teaches his students, and obviously his students love it. They all look forward to going to his class. We get a lot of examples of the students doing things to better themselves because they want Mr. Silver to see them doing it and to be proud of them. We get all this time in Mr. Silver's classroom and see what an incredible teacher he is. But then we find out that he's grooming this female student that we're getting this 3rd perspective from. So I would put this on the same level of My Dark Vanessa, if you've read that before. This is a really powerful book because the author examines how the teacher is this incredible teacher in the classroom, and the students really look up to him, and he's so respected at school. And then behind the scenes, he's doing this unforgivable thing with a student. So it's a really interesting character study of perceptions and the face that people give off in life, and how what we see of them isn't necessarily the reality. So this was a really interesting book, and I think it was really well written to make you think about that. People aren't always what you see them to be. So after I finished this book, I went on Goodreads and I did some reading of some reviews, and I found out that actually this book is based on the life of the author, that this author was a teacher in a Parisian international school, and he did have a relationship with a student, which is obviously horrific and horrible. I can't believe that that happened. I really don't like that he's benefiting off such a horrible thing by writing this book. Like I said, I didn't know that before I bought the book, that it's based on a real story of the author, no less. I didn't know that, and I don't like that he's making money off of this horrible thing. Luckily, I did buy this book secondhand, so the money didn't go into his pocket, which is good. However, I have to say that I really enjoyed this book before I found that out, and like I said, I think it's a really interesting character study, and it really makes you think when you're reading it. So all in all, I gave this a 5 stars, but I really don't like that this is based on a true story. I think it's horrific that he's benefiting off this horrible thing that he's done. But in the end, I would recommend this book. I would just recommend that you get it secondhand or from the library so that the author isn't still financially benefiting from this horrible thing that he's done. The next book that I read is a collection of essays called Trickmere by Tolentino. Obviously, this has been all over BookTube, all over Bookstagram, all over BookTok, so you've probably already heard about it, so I don't need to say too much. But it's a collection of essays ranging from the internet to religion to scams to the University of Virginia to being on a reality show. It runs the gambit of topics. I really wanted to like this. I was really looking forward to the essays called Always Be Optimizing, Pure Heroines, and The Cult of the Difficult Woman. But all 3 of them, they really fell flat for me. I was really disappointed. The premise of these different essays, especially The Cult of the Difficult Woman, I thought that that would be really interesting to learn about how, you know, women are always stereotyped to be difficult and a bitch, and how men are never perceived that way. They're just seen as powerful and a leader. Maybe it was because it was so hyped up on all of social media. I did listen to the audiobook while I physically read it at the same time, and the audiobook is narrated by Tolentino, the author, so I would recommend that. But overall, I don't know, it just didn't meet my expectations and I was a little bit let down by it. I gave it 3.5 stars. The next thing that I read was actually a play, and I don't have my physical copy with me right now, but I read The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. If you like Victorian England, you have to read The Importance of Being Earnest. Personally, I love Victorian England, and Oscar Wilde's writing is so good. He's so witty and smart and sarcastic, and I love that. Kind of like in The Picture of Dorian Gray, there's just so many one-liners. It's the exact same thing in The Importance of Being Earnest. There's so many good one-liners. Basically, the play is about 2 friends, and they have secret identities, and the whole thing is about the confusion of mistaken identities. If you like Victorian England and you like The Picture of Dorian Gray, I would highly suggest that you read this. I mean, it's fast, it's just a play, or of course you could watch it. I just really appreciate the wit and sarcasm of Oscar Wilde and his musings on Victorian England. This is actually the 2nd time I've read it. I liked it, but it's not going to be one of my all-time favorite things, and I gave it 3 stars. The next thing I read was something that I've been waiting to read since like 2017 because I absolutely loved the Game of Thrones series like everybody else on the planet. Normally I like to read the book before I watch a series or a movie adaptation, but I got so far into the TV series without reading the books that I just watched the whole thing. I just watched the final season live with everybody, and then I told myself I'm gonna wait a little bit, try to forget about what happens, which how could you forget? And then I'll read the books. So finally that time has come, almost 4 years later, and I read A Game of Thrones. So the series is actually called A Song of Ice and Fire, and the first book is called A Game of Thrones, whereas obviously the series is called Game of Thrones. Basically, we're in this other world where there's 7 kingdoms, and we're following different characters from different parts of the 7 kingdoms. So at the beginning of this book, the king has a hand, the hand being like the head advisor to the king. The hand dies, and so the king goes to see his best friend all the way in the north to ask him to be the new hand. And basically that sets off everything. That sets off the entire story, is the friend in the north accepting to go down to the capital of the 7 kingdoms and to be the hand to this king. And that sets everything in motion, because meanwhile at the same time there's this young woman basically in like another country almost, and her brother are trying to go back to Westeros. Westeros is like the main land, and their family used to be the rulers of Westeros, and so it's about them trying to get back to Westeros so that her brother can rule, because like he's the rightful heir. It's just incredible the way that George R.R. Martin takes you around the 7 kingdoms, thanks to having all these different perspectives, these different people around this world, and seeing how they all connect to each other. The only criticism I will say is that if I hadn't seen the show, I would be very confused about all the people, because if you've seen the show, you know how many freaking characters there are and how many places there are and how many titles there are, and you have to keep it all straight. Take that number and multiply it by like 10. That's how many are in the book. I don't know how people keep it straight if they're only reading the book and haven't seen the series. Having watched the series really helped me, and I know who is going to end up being important and who probably isn't going to end up being important, so I can keep things straight. But that's really my only criticism. Now, I was actually really surprised at how closely the series followed this book. It was really fun though. Even though I've seen the series, it's been a really long time since I watched season 1 especially. It was so much fun going into this book and reading something and being like, oh yeah, I forgot about this, and oh yeah, I forgot about that character, and oh yeah, I forgot that that happened. Like, that was so fun, because just how much I love the series, it was like watching it again. But while reading it, you get even more details and you find out more motivation about why people do the things that they do, which obviously is a lot harder to depict on a TV screen. So if you're a fan, I would definitely recommend, even though this book follows very closely the events of the first season, and this book finishes at the same place that season 1 ends, I would still really highly recommend, because you get so much more back information, obviously, as normally you do with the book. I really, really love this. It's quite long, but I never once got bored. It was a pleasure to read. Whenever I had to put it down, I was always thinking about when could I pick it up again. I was constantly thinking about this book. I gave this an easy 5 stars. It was incredible. The next book I read just came out recently, and I was really looking forward to reading it, and that's The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. Now, obviously, I'm in Paris, The Paris Apartment. I had to read it. I didn't have a choice, you know. The book forced me. Lucy Foley forced me to read this. But also, you know what else forced me to read this book? This cover. Just look at it. It's beautiful. I love the text. I love the background. It has the typical Parisian building in the background. I love this cover. And also the spine too is really, really nice. I have read The Guest List by Lucy Foley before. I haven't read The Hunting Party, but I heard The Guest List and The Hunting Party are pretty similar. But I read The Guest List. I liked it. It was fine. I didn't like the ending, but I sped through it. It's just a quick read. And after reading this, I'm realizing that Lucy Foley books are just like, you speed through them. Every chapter pretty much leaves you on a cliffhanger and you want to keep reading it. And the chapters are super short, so that's really conducive to reading really quickly. So this book is about Ben, who moves to Paris from England, and his sister Jess goes to visit him one day. But when Jess shows up at the Paris apartment, he's not there. And so obviously a bunch of other people live in the building. Jess tries to find out, what do these people know? Do they know anything about why her brother's not there? What happened to her brother? And her trying to piece together the clues. Like I said, I did speed through this because it's a very fast read, so that's a positive. I really like that. I like that it was in Paris. However, Lucy Foley really didn't take advantage of the fact that it was in Paris. This could have been anywhere. There's really nothing that made it unique to Paris. This could have been in New York City. It could have been in London. There was nothing unique about it to make it obvious that we were in Paris, which I really think was a missed opportunity, and personally I was really sad about. I was really looking forward to having little nods to Parisian things in it, and there really wasn't, which was really a shame. I think, like I said, I think it's a missed opportunity. Also, like I said, for The Guest List, I didn't like how that ended, and I was really worried that this was going to do the exact same thing, but luckily it didn't, so I did appreciate that. And because I read it so quickly, obviously I did enjoy it a little bit, despite a few of the things that I didn't like. I ended up giving this 3.75 stars, which isn't hateful. I mean, I've seen so far that a lot of people really don't like this. It wasn't that bad for me. I still had a good time reading it. I still sped through it. I just didn't love it like I was hoping to love it. The next book that I read was Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I've heard so much about this book, but no one ever said what it was about. I think it's just assumed that people know what this is about, but I never knew what it was about, and no one ever said what it was about. So I'm going to tell you what it's about, even though you've probably read it before, but just in case, I'm going to say it. This book is about Coraline. She lives in this duplex house with her mom and dad, so they live on one side, and there's this door in their living room, and one day she asked her mom, what's on the other side of the door? And she said, oh, there's nothing on the other side of the door. It's a brick wall, because it's the dividing wall between the duplex. And so she opens the door one day for Coraline and shows her, like, see here, it's a brick wall. Well, then one day Coraline opens the door and there's no more brick wall, it's a hallway. So Coraline goes down the hallway, and basically it's like an alternate universe where it's her parents on the other side of this duplex, but it's not her parents. Like, it's really like kooky, bizarre versions of her parents, but she knows it's not her parents, but it's like these two people are trying to be her parents, and these fake parents of hers are trying to get her to stay on that side of the duplex and to never go back to her real life. And so it's really fun. I wish I would have read it at Halloween because it's more of like a spooky story. I mean, it's like a middle grade young adult book. It is kind of scary at times, and this is the illustrated edition, and some of the illustrations are kind of freaky, but overall I really enjoyed this. I think I'm going to watch the movie adaptation sometime soon. I really like this, but it's not an all-time favorite book, so I gave it 3.5 stars. So it didn't take very long to read Coraline, and I kind of just forced myself to read that after finishing A Game of Thrones, because all I wanted to do after reading A Game of Thrones was jump to the next book. But I said, no. Take a break. There's only 5 books. And who knows when the Winds of Winter is coming, so pace yourself, girl. So I fit in Coraline, but then when I was done with that, I said, I need the next book, like yesterday. So I picked up A Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin. Like I said, the first book, A Game of Thrones, it follows very closely the first season of the show. This one, it starts and finishes at the same time that the second season starts and finishes. However, here we start to get some differences between the show and the book. Now, I'm not going to get into plot points because it would give spoilers for the first book, but let me just say, this is so good. Again, same thing with the first book. Every time I put down the book, all I could think about is when I could pick it up again, nonstop. This is 1,000 pages. Not one page did I get bored. Not one. It's 1,000 pages. I didn't get bored once. And I was constantly thinking about when can I pick it up again. I would highly recommend picking up this series if you're a fantasy fan and you haven't read it yet. Also, can we just appreciate my editions of these books? I have the whole series in these faux leather bound books, and they're just absolutely beautiful. I just finished this yesterday, and as I was nearing the end, I kept telling myself, okay, well, you're gonna have to read something else. You can't jump to the 3rd book. You need to take a break. What are you going to read? Because you're not going to read the 3rd book. I'm going to read the 3rd book. You know those books or those series that you read and they become your entire personality? That's this series. It's my entire personality. So obviously I probably don't need to say this, but this is a 5-star. So those are all the books I've read so far in 2022. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Also, maybe you got some inspiration of a book that you'd like to read. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these books if you have read them as well. So in the comments below, let me know if you've read any of these books. What did you think of them? What was your star rating? If you haven't read any of these books, did any of them sound interesting? Which one would you pick up to read? So that's all for today. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!